Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where today we will be taking a look at the Wiesel 1 MK prototype. Now I'm going to be careful in this review because my biggest regret as a tank reviewer is I told everyone to buy the Era 3 Wiesel and we all know how that turned out, so I'm not going to do that again, learning from my mistakes. The Wiesel 1, it's a troll vehicle. You just saw me there, School of Begleitpanzer, he didn't have a clue I was there, snuck up behind him, killed him, done. The BMP-2 doesn't know I'm here, the T-10 doesn't know I'm here. The only reason the BMP-2 saw me is because I fired and gave my position away. So, yeah, it's quite powerful in that sense, but there's more to it than just that. And the word I want to use to summarize this entire review is complicated. So is the Wiesel 1 a good light tank? Yes and no. It has its pros and cons. Is it good for the game? Yes and no. It has a 65% silver boost, and for 11,300 gold, the base package, it's pricey, but you do get a decent light tank. Alright, let's take a look at this thing in a little more detail and take a look at its stats. So, before I do, actually, I'll just add, I would normally compare this to another premium, but again, this thing is like the Monster Jaeger. It's so unique, I don't think a comparison would actually be worth it. What I can say, though, is that if you want a mental picture of what this thing is like, picture a slightly slower Era 3 Wiesel and picture the gun of the BMP-2 that does marder damage. That's kind of where we're at with this thing. So, the Wiesel 1 has 175mm of pen on standard rounds and 35mm of pen on secondary rounds. The BMP-2 has 170mm of pen on gold rounds, so that's why I'm mentioning the BMP-2. BMP-2 gold rounds, pen-wise, similar. The standard Wiesel rounds will do an average of 25 alpha, while the secondary will do an average of 30 alpha. The BMP-2 only does 15, so from an alpha point of view, the BMP-2 does fall behind, but that's where the marder comparison comes in. The Wiesel 1 has 2,200 hit points. Unboosted, it will max out at 75 kilometers an hour. It has a view range of 570 meters and a still concealment and moving concealment of 321. So those are the high level stats, but they do not in any way whatsoever paint the entire picture of this vehicle. Because like I said, this vehicle is complicated. Very complicated. The Wiesel 1 will dominate and it will shred every light tank and every medium in Era 2. Earlier, I mentioned that there are pros and cons to this tank. That is the pro. The pro is that it'll shred mediums and lights. However, the Wiesel 1 will struggle, and I will go as far as saying in some circumstances it will be totally useless against some of the heavies. T72AV, FV4211. Those are the heavies I mean. That's the con. It has a 100 round clip that it can empty in 6 seconds. As you are seeing right now. Oh dear. Bye-bye, Rakuten. 35 meters of concealment when you have the right crew, equipment, and consumables. And it doesn't have to deal with the minimum arm distance issue that the Era 3 Wiesel now does have to deal with. And that there is why I don't think this is good for the game. The Wiesel 1 can sneak up to any target. It can get to 35 meters from that target, which ensures that at that range, even with the 1.2 meter moving accuracy or whatever it is, I can't remember, even with the terrible moving accuracy, when you're that close, none of your shots are going to miss. You can circle them for 6 seconds and then you can disappear just as quickly as you arrived. I don't need to, I'm not the first person to say this. This is not a playstyle that's good for the game. We already established this is not good with the Era 3 Wiesel. And the Wiesel 1 has every advantage in an engagement. To a certain point. The turning circle of the Wiesel is much bigger than the Era 3 Wiesel. What you're seeing the Wiesel do right now, that turn I just did there, that is as tight as it will turn. That's not me just easing up on the stick. No. it's not very good. The hull rotation is not very good. I think the era, I think it's 52 degrees per second, and the era 3 is 38. Or is it the other way around? It may be the other way. It probably is the other way around. Anyway, this thing is slower than the Era 3 one. So that is where you'll notice that it is... it's not quite as nimble. The handbrake is still just as good, but it's not quite as nimble in turns as the Era 3 Wiesel, which means that you will struggle to be nimble in close range engagements and on city maps as well. I can imagine when you've got to take lots of tight turns and city maps, you're going to struggle. But the biggest limitation of the Wiesel 1 is its ammo count. You only have 700 rounds. That's 42 seconds of firing time in a game. And you can burn through that in no time at all. If you're an aggressive player, you will struggle with ammo count. The Wiesel 1 needs to be played smart. Not because it's difficult to play. It needs to be played smart because it is so easy to play. And because it's so easy to play, it then becomes its own worst enemy. If you play the Wiesel 1 like the Era 3 Wiesel, you will become useless within the first few minutes of a game because you'll have no ammo left. You can be aggressive in this thing. You just can. The concealment means that you can sneak in and you can be as aggressive as you want to be, very much like the Era 3 Wiesel. But the Era 3 Wiesel has 24 ATGMs. That's 24 shots. You just don't have that kind of damage output in the Wiesel 1. And that is why this vehicle is so limited. You've got to play this thing like a scout. And I'll just break here for a second to say, yeah, Big Light Panzer, you don't know what to do yourself, do you? You've met your match. You can't just spam your trigger and get away with it. But anyway, there goes the Big Light Panzer, and you'll notice there goes my ammo count for the game. 8 rounds left. Not brilliant, not very good to be in a position where we could win the game, but I've got no ammo left. Now, I say that this is a limitation. I have admittedly done over 12,000 damage with my 700 rounds, but let's just see how the rest of this game plays out, and you'll understand why I'm saying this is complicated. You need to pick your targets very carefully in this tank because you can't afford to fire at everything that is a potential target, and that is something that is unusual in this game. Normally, if there's a potential target and you're in a vehicle that's as nimble and as concealed as this one, you'll just take the shot because you can. You can't do that in the Wiesel one. You just can't do it. There you go. Out of ammo. Now what? Now what do I do? So if we were to circle all the way back to the start, this is why I said the vehicle is complicated. It is very good, but it is a knife's edge. Your shots need to count. If they don't, you'll go from driving a very, very good vehicle, which is what this Wiesel 1 has been for the majority of this game so far. You'll go from driving a very good vehicle to a totally useless one. And again, admittedly, you do become useless after 12,000 damage. But again, it's like, well, not many other tanks end up in this position. I'm the last alive. I can't do anything. Yes, I've done 12,000 damage and 4,500 spotting assist, which is an incredibly good result for my very first game, I might add. This is the very first game I played in this vehicle. But I now can't do anything. I am utterly useless. And again, it's complicated. That's why I think this vehicle is so complicated and it's difficult to review. I will say, however, that I think the concealment at 35 meters, I think that kind of level of concealment is toxic for the game. It's a toxic ability for any tank to have because it gives other players absolutely no time to react. There's no minimum arm distance on this gun. You can just rock up at 35 meters, spank them for 6 seconds, and then you can vanish. I do not think that is good for the game. Which again, just adds to the whole, it's complicated. But what about the economy stats though? So the Wiesel 1 has a 65% silver boost, 10% tank XP boost, 10% crew XP boost, and finally a 5% free XP boost. So clearly Wargaming noticed that there were limitations with this vehicle, which is why they gave it a 65% silver boost. But this tank has been a very difficult one to review. It's great, but it is limited. And I think its greatness reaches too far, and its limitations means it falls short. And they've only got 2 seconds left on the cap. And there you go. There goes a 16,000 combined game in a defeat. Not because I played badly or anything like that. I just burned through my ammo way too quickly. So, if a light tank that will let you down and won't let you down at the same time sounds like something you're interested in, buy the Wiesel 1. If you don't think that's a good use of your money, then don't buy the Wiesel 1. It's simple as that. Alright folks, that's all I've got for this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.